Those around, I hear a cry.
To understand his final moments, we have to talk about what he came with, the beginning of his life up till the end. As we all remember and we all know from the seerah, the Prophet ﷺ was born the year of the elephant. This was the year that a man from Abyssinia, Abasha, by the name of Abraha, made the intention to go to attack the Kaaba. And on his way, we remember the significant incident that happened where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed this man and his intention and his army. It's similar to someone from a part of the world who recently, I'm sure some of us have seen it on social media, went online to say that Mecca belongs to them and they want to go and take it over. Please do try. And again, we will have a repeat of this particular incident with Abraham. The Rasul ﷺ was born in this time, and his birth was one that was so miraculous. And even from him coming to this world, there was so much that he brought into this world with him. He would later on grow to be of immense benefit to his community before nubuwwah, before prophethood. But before then, something happened at the age of 6. He had an encounter with, or his first encounter with Angel Jibreel, who approached him as a young boy, cut open his chest, removed the black dot from his heart, and washed his heart in a bowl, a golden bowl with zamzam, and placed the heart back. Later on, much later in his life, at the age of 40, the Prophet ﷺ would then again reunite with Angel Jibreel. And where would this reunion take place? In Ghar al-Hira, the cave of Hira, on Jabal al-Nur. This was the mountain that the Prophet ﷺ would go, or he began a practice of going to seclude himself and reflect on what was becoming of the society he was in. One of the reasons he would go up this mountain is that when you get to the top of the mountain itself, you can see the entire city of Mecca. So the Prophet ﷺ would be on the mountain and see the entire city of Mecca. And through that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began the final message, or began the final revelation to the final messenger in this night, the night of majesty. The Rasul ﷺ would begin his mission on Mount Safa, calling his family to Islam, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. And so he began the mission on Mount Safa, and his mission would also end on another mountain, and I will talk about that at the end. During this period, he would go through numerous trials, from the trials of his companions being chastised, to the trial of being abused and being cursed. Even once, before the eyes of his family, or while he was in sujood, the carcass was, or the intestines of a carcass was taken and dropped on his beloved body while in sujood in front of the Kaaba. And this particular incident was an incident that marked one of the terrible things that the Qurayshi pagans and leaders would do to the Prophet ﷺ. Subsequently after that, he would be given permission to perform the hijrah to Medina. And he gets to Medina. And when he gets to Medina, he establishes the Muslim community. But right while that was happening, unlike in Mecca where there was faith and he had to deal with people who tried to suppress faith, in Medina he had to deal with another cancer, and this was the cancer of hypocrisy. People who came to him or showed themselves as people of faith, but in the real sense, they were not people of faith. Ultimately, the Prophet ﷺ would conquer them. But before all of that would happen, he would go through numerous challenges and trials, including the death of his beloved uncle Hamza at the hands of Wahshi, who would later on embrace Islam. He also encountered injuries to his own physical self in the Battle of Uhud. He lost all of his children, salawatullahi alayhi, with the exception of one, Fatimah. He was able to sacrifice so much, and at every point in time, all he kept saying and thinking of was you and I. He kept thinking of his ummah, and he prayed for this ummah, and he prayed for us, even though he never met some of us. The companions he met with at the time of his death, as it was said during the farewell Hajj, and he performed Hajj once in his lifetime. Why was it once in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ that he performed Hajj? The reason was simple. For 10 years after Hijrah, he had gone through one trial or one battle after the other. From the battle of Badr and Uhud and Hunayn and Khandaq, over 20 battles were fought by the Prophet ﷺ to protect and preserve the Ummah. And finally, in the 10th year, when there was a semblance of peace, he performed the Hajj. And as he performed the Hajj, a lot of people had heard that he was performing it, and they all came to perform Hajj with him, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. And on the mount, Jabal al-Rahmah, this is where the final message came to him. He gave his farewell message, his farewell sermon. It's a long sermon, but amongst the things that he said was that your blood and your property and your honor, referring to the Muslims, is as sacred as this day. That day, the 9th day of Dhul Hijjah, Yawm al-Arafah. As sacred as this month, that month, Dhul Hijjah. It is one of the sacred months in Islam. And as sacred as this city. What city? Makkah. He described so much and admonished the Muslim Ummah and told them, I may not be with you after this. And so it was a farewell speech to over 100,000 Muslims that had come to perform the Hajj with the Prophet ﷺ. Not long after he returned to Medina, on the 29th day of Safar, 11th year after Hijrah, the Prophet ﷺ fell sick. And when he was sick, he started with a headache and it broke into a very severe fever. His sickness was double or triple the sickness of the regular man. And while he was in this state, it became so difficult even for him to lead Salah that he gave permission to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu to lead the prayer. And one day, or as this would keep happening, he would admonish the people, counsel them. And one day he made an admonition in front of the Sahabas and he said to them that Allah has called, or a slave of Allah has been given a bargain or has been given an opportunity by Allah to either choose of this world or return to that which is with Allah, and that slave chose what is with Allah. And who was this slave? The Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Nobody understood this statement in the congregation but Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr began to cry profusely. In this state, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam still continued until finally, at the last moment of his life, the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam sought for permission to stay in the home of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha from his other wives, and they approved. And while he was in her home and the fever kept getting worse, he would take his hands and dip into a bowl of water and sprinkle it over his face. And his daughter, he called for his daughter Fatimah radiallahu ta'ala anha, who came to him, and he whispered something in one ear and Fatima began to cry. And then he whispered in another ear and she began to laugh. And the Prophet ﷺ stayed in this state, and the day or the final moments of his were in the arms of his wife Aisha, precisely on her chest, and his back was before her. And he had seen the brother of Aisha come into the room. That was Abdurrahman. He had a siwak in his hands, and the Rasul ﷺ looked at the siwak, and Aisha knew what he wanted was, he desired the siwak, so she took it, she chewed on it to soften it, and gave it to the Prophet ﷺ as he began to clean his teeth. In that state, he began to say, Ma'an Nabiyyin was Siddiqeen was Shuhada'i was Salihin. And his final statement, Allahumma Rafiq al-A'la, that, oh Allah, O Allah with the highest, O Allah in the company of the highest. And in that state his hands fell down and the life of the Prophet ﷺ was taken. The news spread very quickly in Medina and people could not believe this. Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, whom it was said, after al-masha ala al-ard ba'd al-anbiya, the one who was smart and intelligent and strong, would not accept that the Prophet ﷺ had died. He said, no, he has gone up to meet with Allah as Musa went up. But Abu Bakr, who knew what had happened, when he came and he arrived and he walked past everyone, he went straight to the home of Aisha, where the Prophet ﷺ had been covered, and he knelt down and he opened the face of his beloved. Remember, Abu Bakr was not there when the message was revealed, but yet he accepted that the Prophet of Islam was the Prophet of Allah. And even at the end, he wasn't there at the death of the Prophet ﷺ, but he knew that the Prophet had died. And so he knelt down and he opened the face of the Prophet ﷺ, and he kissed his forehead. And he looked at him, and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq broke down and began to cry. And he says, Bi abi wa ummi, my father and my mother for you, Ya Rasulullah. Allah will not test you with death 2 times. And he goes out to the congregation when everyone is speaking and he makes his famous statement. He asks everyone to sit down and he says, Man kana minkum ya'budu Muhammad, fa inna Muhammadan qad mat. Wa man kana minkum ya'budu Allah, fa inna Allah hayyun la yamut. Whoever from amongst you worships Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, then know that he has died. But whoever worships Allah, then know that Allah is ever living and he will never die. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala count us from amongst the ummah of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam and unite us with him. Wallahi, his final moments are the most touching narrations I ever come across. And even while reading or preparing for this, it is the toughest thing to imagine that our Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam went through this and all that he thought of was this ummah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us worthy of all that he prayed for and thought for us, and may Allah accept all of our du'as. I'm so sorry I have taken more than 5 minutes, but I know that if I was given an hour I would still spend that and it would not be enough. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon the final Nabi, and Nabiyul Ummi, the one whom Allah sent to mankind as guidance for us and rahmatul lil alameen. Jazakumullahu khairan. May Allah bless you and may Allah accept from all of us. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.